anything that you want to ask in the middle, feel free to. So, first of all, I did speak at the PTA meeting last spring, and were any of you there for that meeting? There was one mom. Okay, good. And Freddie, I thought you were there too. So, a lot of this I just left the same because I asked, should I change it up? But they said, no.
It was so good, we heard.
Please present the same information. So I did change a little bit of it at the end. And just to give you a little bit about my background, my master's in and undergrad are in learning disabilities. And so that's kind of my passion, is kids that learn differently. But the truth is, what I have found out is that all kids learn differently. And a lot of it is just figuring out, how your child does learn and how they learn best, and being able to work with that as a parent, and then also hoping that you can advocate for your child in the classroom to make sure that your teachers understand that as well. And the good news is, and this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, is that more and more research is out on this. More and more things are being talked about in regards to how children are learning, and even within the education system, good teaching, and especially like you find here at Sarah Smith, teachers are willing to figure out how to reach a kid, and that didn't work, so let me see what I can do now to reach this kid. And it's not such a set, systematic approach necessarily, for kids. But anyway, I did land at the Skank School, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with Skank, but it is a special needs school in town, but it's for dyslexic kids, and dyslexic kids only. So if you don't know a lot about dyslexic kids, they typically are very bright children who can do well in a mainstream setting as long as they can learn to read. And they don't typically learn how to read with traditional methods. And so there's some different approaches that you can use, and Skank uses one of those approaches. And our model is such that we get the kids to come and stay with us. If they need to come in and actually be in a school all day, every day, getting this kind of remediation, they stay with us only about 2 to 3 years. And then they leave, and by that point, they've been what we call remediated. If you're dyslexic, you're always dyslexic, and but once you learn how to read, if you can learn how to read and have your confidence up, they can take on the world. So I've been there 25 years. I know, I look so young.
You started when you were 3?
That was the answer. Yes, when I was 3, good answer. But anyway, so this is my 26th year. So I was a teacher there for about 13 years. I became the lower school principal. And then I moved into admissions and outplacement, because since we have admissions and kids coming in and kids leaving us, it's a constant flux. And we have 250 kids, and about 90 kids leave every year. And so now I actually am just the placement person. So for about the five past years, I help families, those 90 kids, decide where they want to go, and they leave us. So that's kind of what I do. So I'm very familiar with the schools in town, the Atlanta schools, and one of the things I say, like friends of mine, who come up and say, okay, I know you know all the schools in town, so what's the best school? And I say, guess what? There is no best school in Atlanta, because it's all about fit for your child. Mm-hmm. And of course, a lot of times they're referring to private schools, but then also, we have a lot of children go to public schools as well. And especially when you've got a public school like this one in your neighborhood, you're just very, very fortunate. Well, my husband is an alumni of the Skank School. He is dyslexic, and that's how I found out about Skank. And I don't know if you know this, but dyslexia is genetic. On a 1 to 10 heritability scale, it's a 7. And like breast cancer, sickle cell, there are 3. So if you marry a dyslexic, you might have a dyslexic. And that's one of those things I feel like we need to go tell all those young girls, there's cute, fun, ADHD, dyslexic kids. People, just watch out. Because you're going to end up with a few at your house. Well, anyway, but I'm actually very proud to say that I have brought more dyslexics into the world. But so both of my boys, and I'm just giving this a little background, both of my boys were diagnosed dyslexic. My youngest one, Robert, went to Skank 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, and then he left and went to Sarah Smith 4th and 5th grade, and now he's in 6th grade. So, and then my youngest son was able to take advantage of the kindergarten at Skank. We had started a kindergarten at that time, and he's in 2nd grade now at Skank, and we'll be leaving. So anyway, the reason I said that is that we actually moved into the Sarah Smith School District when Robert was leaving Skank because of Sarah Smith, and we had the most fabulous experience. It was just fabulous. And I didn't think, and I know a lot, I felt like I could not have been paying $20,000 to go to a private school and get a better experience than we had here. So I just want you guys to know that. It was unbelievable. Love this place.
Awesome.
Love the school. So anyway, okay, so let's get started. We'll kind of talk about this. So what I had done was I wanted to talk to you a little bit about individual learning styles because, again, I'm all about kids learning differently. And, you know, what's out there and what's going on with this. And I know you probably know some, but we'll just go a little bit as we go. All right, so learning styles is the individual way that we learn best. And it's also how your information is processed. And I will say the fun thing, especially for people who are involved in education, one of the most exciting things is the functional MRI to come out because they started doing research on the brain and how people process information. And especially for children with dyslexia, that has been tons of fun. But not just dyslexics, it's everything that they're learning about children. And when they're exposed to educational assignments, you know, what does their brain do? How do they process that information? And they're learning tons, which is a lot of fun. So, but it's been around a long time, so this is my little history page. But, you know, even Aristotle, who was working with children, got to the point where he started saying each child possessed specific talents and skills. And I think we all know that, you know, children have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have talents, they have skills, this kind of thing. And I do believe it's so important to figure that out and find out what those are. But even there was a focus on relationship between memory. They started doing even stuff like, okay, memory and whether the information was processed visually or auditorily. Even as early in as the 1900s, they started doing research on that. And then, of course, by the 1920s is really when they started coming up with some intelligence quotient, you know, measures. And that's when they started coming out with the IQs, the Stanford-Binet. And then, but even in the 1950s, there was a huge renewed interest in learning styles and things like this. So, you know, there's lots of ways you can kind of figure it out. But so today, just to show you, I was going to go very quickly over learning styles. What did we learn? Quick overview of learning styles. What are we learning now? What do parents need to know? What are some strategies in the classroom? And then how does Sarah Smith support these learning different learners? Because I do, like I said, feel like Sarah Smith does a very good job. So one of the things I do want you to know, though, is that there is kind of a shift from what people were calling learning styles, really into kind of learning skills. So you're hearing more and more of that in research. So I wanted you to know that. But let's talk a little bit about what has been out there and what you may have heard, you know, about different learning styles. So the first one is what they call visual auditory kinesthetic, and you've probably heard that before, VAK. You know, and does your teacher use VAK, you know, different approaches and things like that. And then also Howard Gardner kind of entered the scene and came up with something called multiple intelligences. And a lot of your teachers, you know, and people in education have been trained on VAK and multiple intelligences. And I just kind of wanted you to know a little bit about what they were. So, first of all, you probably have heard a little bit about VAK. Are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory learner? And some of you probably know this about yourself. I'm a visual learner. I really feel like that's, and I have to say, you know, my husband's dyslexic, my 2 children are dyslexic. And there is something about, I think sometimes when children are like that, I do really believe that dyslexic learners often think differently. They think outside of the box. I think there are a lot of children, not just dyslexic, but that do. And we have this thing in my family where they'll say, "Are you dyslexic?" And I'll say, "No, I'm not dyslexic." And it'll be like, "Oh, that's sad," because, you know, and it's like, yeah, I just think totally inside the box. I'm so not creative. Anyway, but it is funny, when I am forced to do something auditorily, I'm terrible at it. You know, we've gotten where we listen to books on tape now. And it's so funny to me because, you know, if we go to a movie, I'm just like totally in the movie. You know, we leave the movie and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so unbelievable, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of it is because it's multi-sensory too. But then I'll be like, I can remember scenes. Oh, don't you remember she had on that red dress and it had this and she had worn those silver shoes and, you know, whatever it is, if you're like that. Anyway, so my husband, you know, got us to listen to a lot of books on tape. And I'm just like, stop. Who is talking? What are they saying? I don't even know. And he's like, it's the pirate. What pirate? The pirate, the main character of the story. I'm like, okay, we've got to rewind it. I don't even know who the pirate is. and some of that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I don't know. Get that. But anyway, so you probably know a visual learner, someone who does process all that new information by reading. And you can go back and read some of this, but I think, it's that keen sense of observation, and you probably recognize that in your children, because they will do the same thing and say, don't you remember? And they can visually describe what they saw or what they learned. A lot of visual learners are good spellers because they can learn visually, and so, there's things like that they can do and remember. But the auditory is truly processing that information orally. Can they retain it? Do they understand, all of the different things orally? So anyway, but they are the ones that learn songs quickly, and that's another thing. Are y'all like this? I mean, I start singing a song that I heard on the radio. My husband says, what are you singing? I'm singing that song. Those are not the words. Have you ever had that? Anyway, and I'm like, yeah, they are. He's like, no, they're not. A hymn, I'm good with hymns, but why? Because I had to read the hymns, right? But the songs on the radio, he's like, no, Ellen, those are not the words. So anyway, it's those kinds of things, but you probably notice that even with your children. They can pick up, they sing the words beautifully. And you're like, how did they learn that so quickly? Again, just noticing some of these things will help you. And then that kinesthetic learner, and this is just an amazing thing to watch in a child who can, if they can get up and do that learning somehow, with their body movement, it is just another channel that takes it to their brain, and it is fascinating to see those kids.
Are those the kids who do their homework standing up? That's my daughter. She's like this, moving.
It can
she
be.
literally will stand up when she's doing
absolutely can be a
homework.
part of it, yes. They have to be moving, they have to do things. But also not only that, and the tactile, a lot of this, and there's a lot of research about this, but you do have neurons in your fingers, and at Skank we do a lot of tracing. And if you have a child that's like that and they're having trouble learning a spelling word, you can say, hey, let's write that. If you're like me, you can say, let's write that in the dust on the table. But anyway, or you just have them write it on your clean table. But, let's spell that. Let's spell that word, whatever it is. Beautiful. Let's do it. B-E-A-U-T-I-F-U-L. The neurons in the tip of their finger will actually be another channel that goes to their brain. And we do a lot of that. Let's do it tactile. But that's a lot of tactile, but that kinesthetic is the child that does like this. B-E-A-U, that kind of thing. And you can do a lot of different things with a child like that. You can say, we're going to spell your spelling words. I want you to stand up, and I want you to do jumping jacks and spell said. Okay, now I want you to twirl and spell beautiful. That kind of thing. And it just, believe it or not, that movement is also helping with that. So, anyway. Okay, Howard Gardner came up with a multiple intelligence, and again, I just kind of want you to know this, and I'm not even going to go over this. You can go back over it and look at these, and I would encourage you to do it. Now, I'll be honest with you, there's not tons of research that supports either one of these. I'm just going to be honest. It's not. There's not. But I do think it's important to know, because children do learn differently. There are ways that they can learn, and as a parent, I feel like it's our duty to kind of figure that out, and ask teachers, when do you notice that they do well in the classroom? When is helping to figure that out for your own child. But according to Howard Gardner, of course, and when he came out with this, he felt like that you can figure out their intelligence. And if you look at the different ones, that's the worst slide in the world, I know, but I wanted you to have them on there so you could go back and kind of read it. But there's a visual of it, and is it an interpersonal or intrapersonal? Are they that bodily kinesthetic, musical, rhythmical? And of course what they do on this page is even give you some professions that these type of learners end up doing. So it's kind of interesting just to see. So I think the slide I just showed, when you have some time, go back and just say, which one kind of fits my child? What would it be? And again, and I'll talk to you about this in a minute, but because the best thing, again, that has happened is neuroscience. Now, neuroscience is not in its infancy, but neuroscience in studying about learning difficulties and learning differences and learning styles is in its infancy because of, like I said, because of the functional MRI. So that's been tons of fun. So, but it's showing how information is actually processed, like I mentioned. And of course, what it's doing is validating many good teaching practices that educators are already using. And it's teaching us how to better engage students in meaningful learning. It is teaching us great information about issues that affect learning. And of course, dyslexia being one of them, but ADHD. What is that ADHD brain doing? For those of us, who believe that it is a neurological disorder. What's going on with that brain? And they're not turning it off. Well, you need to learn about those things. And they're finding out tons of good information. Also, I know y'all have been reading a lot of articles about the teenage brain. I mean, the fact that you are now their frontal lobe, right? You have to be your teenager's frontal lobe. Not sure you're aware of that. But there's some of us that have decided we're going to start, like instead of a book club, we're going to start a frontal lobe and just go and meet and talk about how you have to be your frontal lobe for your child. But the research on the teenage brain is fascinating. And I will just, as an aside, tell you this. I have a friend who was trying to talk to her children about their poor decision making as teenagers. And she took out an article that showed some very graphic pictures of the brain imaging. Oh yeah, we're gonna tell y'all. And actually sat down with her children because she was like, okay, they're smart kids. I'm going to show them what's going on in their teenage brain and why I keep saying you really aren't capable of making the best decisions right now. And that was basically the gist. I think she handled a little bit better. It was amazing how her teenagers responded. Wow. She was telling me about it. And it made sense to them, and they were like, oh, okay, Mom. And she said it was amazing, the difference in how they were starting to listen to her a little bit more about the impulsivity and some of the things, the poor decision making, once they saw that research. So I just think it's interesting.
Someone spoke at Sutton yesterday on the teenage.
Was it Mark Crawford that did it?
I think so. I missed it, and I got heard from my friends. You should have been there, and I hope they're going to put it on. PPT or what she called? Is that a podcast or something?
Yeah.
I think she said she was gonna.
Oh, I hope so too, because
website.
I didn't go either, and I wanted to go. And Mark Crawford is so good. He is a really good speaker and everything, and he does a lot of work with a lot of teenage boys, just so you know, and stuff. So he's great. So that's one of the things. Well, here's another thing. And I'm sure this isn't a big surprise to you, but one of the things that they are starting to see with the brain research is that if a child is anxious, what happens when a child is anxious, and it is amazing what happens with the brain. It pretty much stops. I mean, it's like there's no learning going to take place. There's nothing. There's no decision making. They can't learn. They can't because of what happens in the brain when a child is anxious. So that part is huge, and it's huge in our classrooms because we have got to make sure that we have these safe environments for our kids so that they realize it's a safe place, so that the teachers, they realize, no, my teacher really gets me, and I know she only wants what's best for me, even if she's hard on me, because, she wants me to learn. If a child can feel safe, then they will take that risk, but they have to feel safe in order to be available for the learning. So that has been huge. Anyway, and then also the neural connections and timing is also another thing that they're really starting to discover. And that there's really no left brain, right brain. I know we still hear that. People still refer to that, oh, I'm so right brain, I'm so creative, blah, 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 this kind of thing. But the truth is, that is not the case. You are working both sections of your brain all the time. So it's very interesting. So that's, just so you know, those are some of the trends that are being discovered with the recent research. And then the other thing that is good is that it's showing us that there's greater flexibility to learning styles than just a visual kinesthetic. So I don't want you to get trapped in saying my child's a visual learner, or I'm an auditory learner, that kind of thing. But I want you to realize that looking to figure out what is best for your child is important. So with that, then I do have to tell you, there are a lot of great new organizations. There's this fabulous conference that takes place every year, and I would encourage you to, as a parent body, to see if you could even send some teachers to the Learning in the Brain conference. They may already have people that go from here, but it's usually held in Boston every year, and a lot of it is they're trying to take all of the information that we have regarding technology and what is expected in our world today regarding professions and jobs, and they're trying to say, okay, what are we doing in school that's going to help our kids, prepare our kids for that? Because, technology's coming so fast at us, and what does that mean? And then also, what type of jobs are being developed in this world. We want to make sure we have people that can go into those jobs and be prepared for that. So one of the things that they're getting into now is they're saying, the 3 R's obviously are important, but really what's more important now are the 3 C's. And the 3 C's are critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. And again, that came from this past conference. It was the big topic this past fall, was the 3 C's. So, I think obviously it's important for us to look at the classroom to say, well, what are we doing to promote critical thinking, collaboration, communication? Tony Wagner, who has written a book called The Global Achievement Gap, Learning to Innovate and Change Leadership, has also come up with the 7 survival skills. And if you look at those, you will see some of the same things, the critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, agility and adaptability in thinking, initiative and entrepreneurialism, effective oral and written communication, ability to access and analyze information, and curiosity and imagination. This is our future. Everybody is feeling like that is very important. So, and then along with that, Dr. Edward Hallowell, who I have to say is just one of my favorite people in the world. He's a psychiatrist in Boston, and does a ton of work on children with ADHD. So a lot of his books are about children with ADHD, but then he has kind of veered off and done a lot of things. He has this great book called What to Do When You Worry About Your Child. It's just a nice parent one. He also just wrote this book called that is so crazy busy, and it's about how we are all living these crazy busy lives and what that is doing to affect our children. And come on, get in the car, we gotta go. Now you gotta go to soccer, now you gotta do this, now you gotta do that. Anyway, it's a great book. But he also wrote a book called Shine, which is using brain science to get the best from your people, because he was starting to get involved in workshops and doing a lot of that. So he says that there's a cycle of excellence if you really, really, really want to have your people doing the best job that they can do, and that's it. So again, a lot of it is this whole, following those 3 C's, looking at this. I mean, this is a lot of where the brain research is leading us. Also, Dr. Howard Gardner, who I mentioned, well, he's also continued to do some research. He was the multiple intelligences guy. So what he has been doing is saying, okay, well, let's he's kind of perfected his and narrowed his down, and he has come up with 5 minds of the future. So instead of just saying, oh, okay, you've got this kind of mind or this kind of intelligence, he's kind of even adapted it more toward this: the disciplined mind, the synthesizing mind, the creating mind, respectful mind, ethical mind. So I think all of those things, just looking at those, reading those, after we leave, just to, see what hits you, gels with you, and what works with your family and your child. But one of the things I think that we have to remember is that knowledge is a free commodity. I mean, even when you and I were growing up, we had encyclopedias. I'm maybe speaking out of turn, some of you might be a lot younger, but anyway. But how many of you are sit at a restaurant and something gets brought up and you say, oh yeah, who did write that book? What do?
Google it and find out.
You
right
pull
there.
out your phone, you Google it, and you say, no, it was so-and-so. I mean, we can do it in a half a beat. And my children do it better than I do. My kids are faster on their, whatever, and Robert got a Kindle Fire, and he can just look up anything he wants to look up. So knowledge is a free commodity. So, they don't have to go to the classroom to learn this information. So what are we doing in the classroom to make sure we're supporting that? And of course, what a lot of them are doing, and you hear more and more about this, but like for instance, homework assignments, it's not like go home and practice these words and write them 10 times or do whatever, that's not it. It's like, okay, you know what I want you to do? Go home and find out what you can find out about blah, blah, blah. And come back and tell me tomorrow. And that is exciting to kids, They're like, okay, I will do it. And they go home and they come, so then they come back and they can really enter into a discussion to say, well, when I looked it up, I found this. You know, it's just stuff like that. Even little things like Shrove Tuesday, you know, Fat Tuesday was yesterday and Shrove Tuesday was yesterday, and we have some British friends and they still do Shrove Tuesday, which is Pancake Day. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that tradition, but it was so funny because I just said Shrove Tuesday. Oh, we're having pancakes for supper. It's Shrove Tuesday. And my son just said, you know, what's Shrove Tuesday? And it was kind of one of those things, I'm fixing pancakes, so anyway, he comes back, and at dinner, he sits there, oh, I just read this about Shrove Tuesday. And so he just announced it, read all about the tradition of it, that kind of thing. It's just so much fun that you can do that. So, okay, but students have got to learn to ask the right questions. They've got to learn to work together. Because, again, it's this collaboration that's going on. And they need to put their own passion into words. So in schools, we've got to praise the failure to encourage initiative and entrepreneurialism. And, you know, and that can be tricky because a lot of times teachers have been taught, you know, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm teaching you this. You're going to learn it this way. And obviously, there are teachers like that at Sir Smith. But, you know, it's still, it's a switch. You know, it's a big switch into being open-minded to that kind of thinking and that kind of learning. And, you know, you'll be best if you do best at everything all the time. And we've got to set parents free of that. Because, and I think you know what I'm talking a little bit about. Like, you know, it's true. You hear about a child who is doing well in school, which is great, you know. But at the same time, you know, if your child isn't doing well in school, then that's a bad thing. You know, oh yeah, my child makes all A's, this kind of thing. And I want to say, that is so great. That is great that your child is really good at memorizing information quickly and regurgitating it well on the test the next day. That is awesome. My child doesn't do well with that. He has a terrible visual memory and, you know, trouble with working memory. But he sure is bright and can do this, you know, whatever. But anyway, but I mean, you know, I do want to set us free a little bit from that because it's you know, we do have that standard of measurement of saying, you know, and so a lot of times, you know, I've heard parents say, oh, my oldest child, oh, she's brilliant and she makes straight A's and she, you know, all these school type things, you know, and then they'll say, but my other child, whatever. And it's like, but that child's brilliant too. Or that child's really smart too. They're just not as good at school activities, you know, a lot of times, which often in our world and in our education system is visual memory and learning visually taking in a lot of information and learning information, regurgitating it quickly. And not always visually. Again, at a good school, you're going to have a lot of different types of learning modalities. But anyway, but in America generally, that's what we're talking about. You know, and in some of the rigorous type schools that you hear about, oh yes, my child goes to this school. You know, it's like, that means they're really good at learning a lot of information quickly, you know, again, regurgitating on the test the next day. How much are they really learning it? Or, really, well, can they collaborate well in a group? Have you ever seen them work together to solve a problem? Because this is what the future's saying we need. So, you know, those kinds of things I think we just have got to start thinking that way. I will tell you one thing. I decided if I ever read a book, the name of my book, so y'all can't take this, I'm going to trademark it, but I'm going to call it Is a Wet Duck Dry? Because one of the things I learned early on as a teacher at the school was instead of saying, no, that's not the right answer, instead I would say, tell me why you put that. Because, you know, 99% of the time these kids would have these amazing answers. And there's a little fun book, I think they use it here, Explode the Code, good phonetic-based book. And it asks all these crazy questions, you know, to make sure that the children are actually decoding it correctly. And so one of the questions, yes or no, is a wet duck dry? So what would you say? Is a wet duck dry?
Yes.
You would say a wet duck is dry.
Don't they have wax on their feathers or something?
Okay, well, but most people, believe it or not, would say, is a wet duck dry? No, a wet duck is wet, right? So a little boy comes up and says, John, tell me why you put that. And of course he says, you know, Miss Ellen, I had to think about that. He's in second grade. But, you know, ducks have a repellent oil on their feathers, and it does help them take the water off. And underneath, their down is very dry. You know, so it's like, okay. got that one right. But in a regular situation, it would have been, is a wet duck dry? No, a wet duck's wet. And it would just been a big X, and nobody would have heard
Right.
about that little boy's thinking, or your thinking. You got it right, in my opinion. Anyway, but
It's not even like a second grader.
She
that's
learned,
right.
you learn from your child, right?
Yeah.
Or a duck hunter. In this case, this little boy. But anyway, so, okay. So let's talk a little bit about knowing about your child's learning. Because I really do want you to learn how your child learns best. And so focusing on those child's strengths and then helping them develop those strengths. I mean, one of the things I will say, especially for children who do learn differently, one of the things that helps them the most with their success is for them to also know what they're really good at and what their strengths or weaknesses are. And the fact that their weaknesses are fine. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. That's okay. And you are really good at this, this, and this. And you are not so good at this, this, and this, and that's okay. And we're just going to keep working on all of it. So let's do it. But really focusing on their strengths, making sure you know what they are, and then practicing those areas of weakness, working to develop the potential in the other areas as well. So, and I think, of course, obviously the goal is to help provide a rewarding lifelong pursuit of learning for your child. I mean, I think that's what we really want. We want them to love learning and just enjoy all of those things. So figuring out the best way they can do it without having them become discouraged is huge. So, watching your child play and learn, do they like to read about things or would they rather listen? How do they study? And is it effective? Because, a lot of times we say, you're going to sit right here. It's going to be perfectly quiet. I want you to have this system, ba-bam, ba-bam, ba-bam. If that works for them and it's a system you've implemented and it's great, great. But if it's not working, don't do it. They may need a radio on, while they're studying, believe it or not. Or there's just certain things, and I think figuring that out is huge. Do they need to move? Do they need to be standing up and doing their homework?
Or just moving.
Absolutely. And, at Skank, we do all kinds of things. They sit on those big yoga balls,
My son does
Yeah,
that.
have them sit on a yoga ball while they're doing it. You would be amazed. Also, we've done things just like if you have a regular desk, just wrap a bungee cord around there, because even if they can just bounce their feet while they're doing their homework, add that motion sometimes is very helpful, just doing anything like that. Obviously, standing up. There's been a lot of research, I don't know if y'all know this, and one of the big schools that's gotten into this is GPS, Girls Preparatory School in Chattanooga, and they have even designed desks where the girls can stand, and just they stand and do a lot of the work. It's much more effective for them than to be sitting. Anyway, and then, like I said, it's a quiet place necessary, just figuring it out. This is horrible. You can read this at home too, but so, figuring out. And I talked a lot about homework here because I think that's when the parents see the child and are working with them, homework or a science project or whatever it is. Kind of just figuring out, recite important information aloud, record it. Tell someone about what they are learning. Again, what is the most helpful thing for them to do? To talk about it out loud, to, listen to it, whatever. Making up a song or a poem with the information. And y'all, this is where you use YouTube. Go in and type preposition song. I mean, when they have to recite, because you wouldn't believe how many people have figured a lot of this out and are doing things like that. About, above, beyond, Anyway, lots of things like that, because that is huge if they have to learn the 40 prepositions. Go in and just Google whatever it is. See if somebody has created a song. And sure enough, some teacher in Indiana has written a song, whatever. Reading a book, listening to it at the same time. Again, some of this multisensory learning, it can be very helpful. Instead of just reading the book, having them listen to it orally. You have to be careful though, because a lot of the narrators for some of the books on tape are professional actors, and their fluency level is weird. So they read so quickly that sometimes our kids can't follow along. So you just have to kind of watch that out. But anyway, writing things down several times to memorize it. Is it better for them to highlight it, underline it, moving around like when they're studying? Building a model of the information. If you can just say, let's take your Legos and we're going to figure out a way to do this way. Again, it's just you're piquing their interest, they're figuring it out. Playing a game, Scrabble, memory cards, war, to learn their math facts, all these kinds of things. tracing words in order to remember and things like that. Making up acronyms for information. I know we probably all did. Y'all did that in college, So drawing pictures, illustrations to help memorize. Anything that you can do. These are just some of the suggestions, but the truth is you can Google a lot of it, these days, and you can come up with stuff. And then, anyway, I think a lot of it is just asking your child why. Looking around at the circumstances. And also, I would encourage you to come up even with your 3 trouble areas,
Why do you put your clothes on the floor all the time?
Exactly. And I think if you can say to that child, because the truth is, and I'm just going to give you a perfect example, okay? I had a friend, her child had some sensory issues and some things going on. And so she was very overwhelmed by stimuli, which some of our kids are. Anyway, she just got to a point where she refused to do her homework. She said, I'm not doing it. And so her mother was at odds, and of course did the whole thing you do. Oh yes, you're going to do your homework. You have to do your homework. Now I'm going to punish you or I'll reward you. I mean, just all these things. What are you going to do? So she ended up taking her to the therapist that she knew well, and she said she went to her homework. And so, the therapist just, because I think as moms, we have to be able to step back and say, okay, I got to figure this out. But sometimes it's just so daggum hard, and you're just so mad on them at that point. But anyway, this particular situation, what happened was the therapist just talked to the girl and said, what's up with the homework? Can you do your homework? Yeah, I can do it. Is it too hard for you? Just going through all those steps I think are so huge. So then she said, I'm still not going to do it. And so she realized it probably wasn't the homework, it was probably the organizational of the homework. So she says, well, how about if today I just pull out your homework? I'll just pull it out. And so she did. And she said, wow, it looks like you've got some science, and you've got your math, and you've got this. And she said, yeah, here it is. And she said, well, can you do your science homework? At least just do your science homework. So the girl said, yeah, I can do my science homework. So she does her science homework. And then she does the math homework, and it just turns out that basically she was so overwhelmed by having to pull it out of her bag and organize it in a way, which seems like such a simple thing. But as soon as she did that, she did it all. Felt great about herself, that kind of thing. But that was basically the issue. And I think there's just times that we have to do that. And I know one time, I had done this thing where we got to get some exercise, let's go. Everybody, we're going outside. And, my 2 boys, everybody get on their bikes. And my oldest one says, I'm not riding my bike. No, I'm not doing it. And so I'm like, well, we're going on a family bike ride. No, I'm not